I will never understand Altima drivers. They are a unique species. All right, guys, we got a 2025 Acura Integra A-Spec against a 2024 Acura Integra Type S. Both have a 6-speed manual transmission. MSRP on this is around $39,000, whereas with this, it's $53,000. So $14,000 spread. And the question today is, how much more driving experience, how much more driving pleasure do you get for that money? We're gonna start with the A-Spec. It's powered by a 1.5 liter inline-4 VTEC turbo engine, making 200 horsepower, 192 pound-feet of torque, with peak torque starting at 1800 RPM, going up all the way up to 5000 RPM. You can choose a 6-speed manual or a CVT, but luckily today we have a 6-speed manual. This is essentially a tarted up Civic Si with a few upgrades, which we'll get to. But there comes a weight penalty with that. So here we're weighing in right around 3,150 pounds versus the Civic Si at 2,950. Now, the Integra Type S is about 70 pounds more than this, around 3,220 pounds. Both come standard with a helical LSD in the front, although the helical LSD in the Type S is tuned differently, a little bit more aggressive. And the competitors to the A-Spec would include the Audi A3, Mercedes CLA 250, BMW 228i Grand Coupe, and it actually does undercut them quite a bit cost-wise. And I would actually argue the Mazda 3 Turbo is also a competitor, but keep in mind, Mazda 3 Turbo only comes in automatic. And if you want the Mazda 3 with a manual, which we reviewed earlier on the channel right up here, that comes only on the 2.5S premium trim. Getting into the interior, you gotta love how Acura does interiors. This is a nice place to be. It is definitely a little bit more upscale than the Civic Si. You have slightly nicer materials, but very much the same layout. Although this this grille here doesn't go all the way. They replaced it and then broke it up with a plastic trim piece here. And the Civic Si actually has like a honeycomb shape versus just this like cross diamond shape. And I actually prefer the honeycomb, and I prefer that it goes all the way across. But the other materials here, the leathers and such, are a bit nicer. You have power seats that also have memory. Civic Si doesn't have that. You have heated seats as well, heated steering wheel, that again the Civic Si doesn't have. And also even the steering wheel leather feels a bit nicer than what you have in the Civic Si. With this A-Spec, we do have our different driving modes, and you do have adaptive dampers as well. So we're gonna start actually in comfort mode and then dial things up from there. Not a lot of clutch feel, but I like the way the shifter feels. You have that a nice mechanical feeling. There is a little bit of lateral slop, as you can see by the thing wiggling around. And I feel like the throws front to back are medium, but then side to side, very, very narrow and short side to side, which I think if you're pushing the car hard might lead to misshifting every now and then. We've disabled rev match, which by the way is not part of your drive modes. To disable rev match, you have to go into the car settings here on your infotainment. Car needs to be stopped, all that stuff, but you can disable it. Although I wish it was just in the drive modes under individual settings. And in comfort, it's nice and quiet. It is comfortable. I would have no problem dailing this at all. Let's go up into sport. You can instantly feel a lot more weight to the steering rack, which I don't mind. Can feel it claw for grip with that helical LSD. It's a mechanical LSD, and it does help you feel more connected to the front end of the vehicle. But the car's still really soft even in the sports setting. The adaptive dampers don't have a huge range in terms of how soft to how hard they get. It's pretty soft even when you put it into sport mode, and it's only slightly firmer than when it's in comfort. It's not a big difference. I like the throws though. You got a little bit more of this effort between gates. Of course, this is a cable linkage. It's not mechanical. The transmission isn't right underneath. definitely get some torque steer. This doesn't have the fancy dual axis McPherson strut front suspension that the Type S has, but this also has a lot less horsepower and torque, right? It's like what, 120 fewer horsepower and something similar in terms of pound-feet of torque as well. And because of that, you're getting like a moderate amount of torque steer. If you had 300 horsepower, 300 pound-feet of torque with the suspension geometry, then of course it'd be a lot more torque steer. Obviously on these roads, not pushing it too hard. And when you let off the throttle, get the weight on the front, you can get the rear to step out a bit, but I feel like the traction is still kicking in a bit, even with traction control turned off. Very soft front end, very progressive. And with a front wheel drive vehicle, the way you handle that to get the rear to step out is all about weight transfer. And paradoxically, when the tail does step out, you push on the throttle, it actually pulls you straight, right? Kind of the opposite of a rear-wheel drive vehicle in that sense. Now, some other reflections. I have been driving this car for the last few days. Big shout out to CardinaleWay Acura for actually loaning me the car. They're located here in Las Vegas. And one thing that is really, really bad is actually the rev hang. It is atrocious. So let's get the revs up, 5K, clutch in, and look how long it takes to go down. And then I went to third. Like, do you really need that much revving? And I know it's emissions, but still it is painful when you're driving this to constantly be yanking it down. And yeah, it's, you know, single mass, light flywheel, so not a huge deal, but it just, I think a lot of us manual drivers, we take pride in shifting smoothly and trying to improve our craft. And here there's a little bit of that slight, you know, annoyance that you can't quite nail a smooth upshift with natural pacing. You have to really slow things down. Really impressive though how it claws for grip, even in this A-Spec. This is not a Type S, and it still is able to put the power down and claw for grip. I will never understand Altima drivers. They are a unique species. Throttle response is reasonably consistent throughout the rev range. Like, you can definitely learn and get used to it. And if you don't want to do that, then you can rev match using the built-in system rather than doing it yourself. Even once you get past the turbo threshold, there is going to be some lag here. So let's actually get into second. Get the revs up to 45. Stomp on it, and there's a good second and a half before you start pulling. But by modern standards, it feels pretty lightweight, it feels pretty tossable, and you have a good balance of that nimble sportiness while also giving you comfort. Now, the Civic Si is a much harsher vehicle. We have reviewed that previously on the channel, link to that video down below, and I love the Civic Si. I think it is, especially for the price, it is so much value. You'd have to decide for yourself whether the added creature comforts with the interior, higher quality materials, and heated and memory seats with lumbar support and all that stuff, if that's worth the price premium to you, because it is actually quite substantial, right? From a driving dynamics perspective, the main improvements would be the softer ride comfort if you want something that is going to be easier for your commute and more comfortable. But there is, of course, a weight penalty, and that weight penalty is a lot more than I was expecting. 200 pounds is like, what, 7-8% weight penalty? Also, you would expect a car at this price point, 39K, to have a 360 cam, and for the reverse cam to, you know, be a bit higher resolution. My Mazda CX-50, and Mazda's not as premium as Acura, has a 360 cam and a much higher quality reverse camera as well. But now, let's see how the Type S compares. Now the Integra Type S is powered by an inline-4 as well, but this is a 2-liter turbo, also again with VTEC, making 320 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque. That's an extra 120 horsepower and an extra 118 pound-feet over the A-Spec. Peak torque here though occurs a little bit higher, 2600 RPM, and it ends at 4000. These come only in a 6-speed manual, and again, it's 3,220 pounds. It's about a 70-pound weight penalty over the A-Spec, which is actually not that much, right? When you consider the engine and likely additional cooling, not as much of a weight penalty as I was expecting. I'm actually more surprised by how heavy that thing is compared to a regular Civic Si. We have reviewed this car previously on the channel, and in terms of mods, we have these Apex 18-inch wheels wrapped in Kumho V730 rubber, PRL rear motor mount, Paragon slided brake rotors, both front and rear, with R5 front brake pads and P3 rear brake pads, although the owner admits the R5 is a little bit too aggressive for daily duty. He does sometimes track this, it's great for that, but it's otherwise too noisy on street and requires frequent rebedding. He also added EVS extended lower ball joints on the front to get his camber up to negative 3.9 degrees. Again, good for track, but he's saying it's a little bit too much for street. And in terms of interior mods, we have a throttle pedal spacer and an Acura upgraded shift knob, just like the AP2 S2000. Now, the funny thing here is that this car does have a power adjustable driver's seat, which, I mean, of course it would. It lost the power adjustable front passenger seat, and okay, I get it. They can argue weight savings on that front. But why did they remove the memory function? How are you going to tell me that the memory function is going to add weight to the power driver's seat? That's just a little bit silly to me. But obviously, interior is otherwise very, very similar. You can instantly hear a difference with the engine note. I do appreciate that Honda and Acura tend to get driver ergonomics right. Get into a really good seating position. Again, here a little bit more upright because it's not a dedicated sports car. We'll go traction off. We're gonna start in comfort mode. Oh, wow. Way more power, way more firm. Even in this comfort mode, you can feel that this is far more purpose-built than that regular Integra A-Spec. Shifter feels very similar, except between gates, there's a little bit more crispness as you enter the gate and slightly less resistance as well. I like that the owner, Joe, also decided to disable rev match. Because when you're buying a manual, you might as well do it yourself. Which reminds me, there's this guy at my local track who drives a manual Porsche GT car. And he even has a license plate and everything that goes along with the, hey, like, you know, manual is the way. That's like his vibe, his personality, right? He's like, yo, manual's all the way. And I respect that. Except for the part where then I watch his onboard camera footage of, you know, his recent track laps, and you realize that he's using auto rev match. And I'm like, bro, I don't mind if you use auto rev match, but you can't be the guy, that is talking smack about those who drive auto, and you're saying like, yo, manual's the only way, and then you use auto rev match. Like, what, you can't heel toe yourself, right? That's a big part of the experience of driving stick. But anyways. Get this now down into Sport Plus mode. I get the red tacks. Yeah, steering here is also quite a bit heavier, and it feels more congruent here. With the Acura Integra A-Spec, it feels like the steering is kind of sporty, and then everything else is still pretty not sporty. Whereas here, heavier steering feels more congruent with the rest of the vehicle. Much firmer suspension, as an example. Exhaust is sounding great. It's actually stock exhaust, but he deleted a resonator, so it's a bit louder. But I think it sounds great, not too boomy. Oh, dude, I hate these pedal spacers because they just cut into the side of your foot. Makes it harder to heel toe. Oh, dude, way more dynamic. You can see that rear end wants to come out much more immediately. Traction's still kicking in. There must be a way to like fully disable traction beyond just holding it. But I like that. It feels a far more dynamic and sharp and responsive with your inputs, which makes sense. Firmer car. And even with these Kumho V730 tires, I'm surprised that we were able to do that at such low speed. So still somewhat playful. Still definitely dynamic. I feel like the throttle response here is more natural than in the A-Spec. And in the A-Spec, there was a little bit of a learning curve to get that rev match just dialed in right. And here, less of a learning curve to get those smooth rev matches. The heel toe is actually harder here because I never like pedal spacers, because as you rotate your right foot, oftentimes that spacer, which brings it closer, will just cut into the side of your foot. I'm personally not a fan, but of course, personal preference there. I also have larger shoes though, so I wear size 13s. I'm actually trying pelotes right now, and I bought these pelotes from a friend's suggestion, actually Fenton from the Zygreen channel. He suggested them several years ago, and I felt like sometimes there's a little bit more cushion than I want down there. I like the minimalist shoes, like the Vivo Barefoots is what I actually normally wear when I'm driving. But anyways, I'll be reviewing the Integra A-Spec again, a dedicated review. We'll be changing my shoes, and I'll tell you how much that affects things, because I don't want that to be the variable that influences my perception of pedal placement and all that stuff. But yeah, guys, I gotta say, I understand why people love the Acura Integra, especially the Type S, because for that extra $14,000, yes, you are definitely getting a lot more car. But $14,000 is also a lot of money. Some other things, I wasn't able to push the car hard on these roads, but I will say the PRL engine mount does make a big difference in terms of that rigidity when you accelerate and not having wheel hop. So we did a dedicated review on that mod and how it changed the car, where we were able to push it harder on a different road. So that's a nice upgrade here as well. Also, can't really comment much on the differences with regards to the helical LSD, just based on the roads that we were driving. But when it comes to the current gen Civic Type Rs and Integra Type S, I do feel like I'm the odd one out. When I drove an EK9 Civic Type R in Japan recently. I've driven a DC2 Type R, both on track and on street, which we've reviewed previously. And I get it. Modern regulations, turbocharged, heavier, less connected, more insulated, all those things. I have a unique take here, and bear with me. I feel like the Integra A-Spec, fits the assignment, followed the assignment a little bit closer than the Type S, even though I would prefer the Type S, don't get me wrong. Let me explain. I feel like the A-Spec, when we think back to the Integra in the 90s, we think of like the GSR and the Type R, and this is kind of like the GSR in a way. It's entry-level luxury that is still engaging. At the price point, it's undercutting a lot of the German competitors. It is still clearly driver-focused. It is still fun to drive. It has that playful character. Not quite as harsh as a Civic Si, right? Definitely more entry-level luxury with the quality of the suspension damping, the NVH, all those things. And it still is relatively light by modern standards. So I appreciate what the A-Spec is at the price of even $39K, which I think is a lot of money, especially when the Civic Si is so much cheaper and gives you 95% of what this has to offer. The biggest issue I have with the Type S is the fact that the Civic Type R, because that car is what, like $8,000 cheaper, maybe $7,000 cheaper than this. Granted, hard to actually buy the car at MSRP because of so many markups on the Civic Type R, whereas the Type S, you can get MSRP. So that's one part of it. I actually think the Civic Type R seats are way better, way more comfortable, even if they don't have all the same comfort functionality as these. They are just as, if not more comfortable, and far more supportive. And I like the interior in the Civic Type R a lot too, and the styling and yada yada. But even then, if we're talking about just driving dynamics, a modern car that weighs 3,200 pounds is lightweight. But when you give it 300 plus horsepower, 300 plus pound-feet of torque, even with your trick dual axis McPherson strut front suspension, you get torque steer. Steering not very talkative, not very communicative at all. The manual transmission is good. Neither one of these has a manual transmission anywhere near as good as an ND Miata. The ND Miata has a direct mechanical connection to the transmission below it, whereas these have cable linkages, front engine, front wheel drive car, transversely mounted, all of the limitations there. It is good for what it is, but there are just so many compromises here. And when I drive the DC2 Type R or the EK9, there are no compromises. You just love those cars for what they are, for the engagement, for the quality. And I get it. That is 2 plus decades ago, and times are different. What the Type S does well is that at this price point, you have a sedan, you can daily it, you got a manual, it's relatively lightweight, and it's a lot cheaper than the offerings from BMW and such, right? The M3, a lot heavier, higher price point. The manual isn't nearly as good there. But anytime I drive one of these cars, I just think it's great, but man, I really fucking miss Honda from the 90s. My friends, let me know what you think with a comment down below. Big shout out to Joe, the owner, for letting me review his Type S. Shout out to CardinaleWay Acura for the A-Spec. Much love, my friends, and I'll see you all in that next one.